Hello everybody, Eric's over here and welcome to my computational science video tutorial. Today's video we're going to be looking at some questions that have come up in the class that I'm teaching. Because the class I'm teaching is working with Python, we're going to focus on Python questions when I do these breakout videos. If you're not having any questions and everything is clear so far, you can feel free to skip this video. It's not going to affect any future videos. Although, maybe some of the things we address might be an issue you're having. My reason for making this video is I figure some of my students had the questions when I was TAing the class in the computer lab, and other students maybe had the same questions but didn't ask, or these questions might return to people if they forget it. And then just in general, people out there on the internet might have similar questions as my students. So you can see here I have some code on the screen. It's a very basic Python program. I'm importing the math module. I've created a function, and I'm doing some stuff with the function. Now the question that came about, a student asked me, why do we have this float after the x? So when we create a function, we give it an import variable. Maybe we can create a function called, square, and we'll give it x as an input and return x times x. We're going to square the variable x. Well, why do I have this colon followed by a float? Why don't I just have an x? I don't need the float. And the reason we put the colon is because we're expecting a specific type of input. So we only want to square and print floating point numbers. So we might say x colon float, and that's going to say, all right, x is a floating point number. Now for s is going to be a string. So what this function will do is we'll give it sort of a prefix for a string to be printed, and then we give it a number to be printed. You can see in the code I say our prefix is our value is, and then we just print the number. If we run this code, we can see that we get the output. Our value is 4.0. The answer is 4.0. And we can use this function to sort of simplify this print statement. This is really just an example to show that we might want to control our input. For x, we want to make sure it's a floating point number. If it's not a floating point number, this math power function won't work, and the program will break at this point. So we kind of have a check on the type of data. Now for s, the type of data of s will be a string. Now usually when I'm doing strings or arrays, I use the type specifier to make sure that I type everything correctly. And some of that comes from just my own habits, and maybe sometimes I forget things. I don't want to make a mistake. If I've been doing a lot of C++ programming, I don't want to say that s is a string, because in Python I think it's just str. So by using something like the type with the single quotes in it, or double quotes, they both work for strings, it'll automatically figure out that s is some sort of string type. Alright, so that was the first question that came up, was why do we have the types here, or why do we have this extra information after the colon? And the reason for that is really to pass along type information into the function. So when we're in the function, we know what type of data we're working with. Another question that a couple people had, which I want to make sure to clarify, is what is this return value? And the reason we use a return value of a function is because the variables in our function only really exist in that function. Outside of the function, they should not exist. The variables exist in the function and during the function, and once the function is finished, those variables will go away. So if we want to assign a value to a variable, we need to create that number and give it there. But we might have a problem where if we're running a function, this function, it's going to finish, then we're going to do the assignment. And what the return value does is it allows the function, kind of in a way, the function stays open and it takes this value and it returns it to the variable we created. All right, so here I say square and print, and because I have my return value, the value that I put here is going to be returned. Now if I wanted to, I could multiply it by 2, and if we run this again, now it's not going to make sense with the names of our function, but if we do 2 times the value, you can see we're going to get 8. It's going to double it when it gets returned. And we know that because our answer is equal to the thing returned by this function. All right, so that's kind of what the return is it allows a form of communication between a function or variables inside a function and variables outside a function. You know, they can communicate through these return values. And, you know, that's sort of the nature of how functions work. Something goes in and something comes out. And that something that comes out is the thing that's returned. So I'm going to close my Python file, and we're going to look at a C++ file to kind of compare the two. In fact, I might just move this off to the side so we can see them side by side. All right, so here we have our C++ program on the screen, side by side with our Python program. And let's take a quick look and compare the two. In C++, we say we have a function, and we name our function by saying double, square and print, double, x, string, s. Now what we are doing here is we're doing something in C++ that we don't do in Python. When we declare or name our function, we're also saying the return type. And C++ requires that we always tell the program what is the return type of a function and what are the types for each input. Additionally, all the inputs in C++ must be in a specific order. So here we see double, square and print, double x, string s. This first double is the type of the value to be returned. The x is going to be of type double. And the s is going to be of type string. And when we look here and we compare this to our Python program, we can see in Python we have things kind of backwards. In Python, we say x colon float. Well, we don't have a colon in C++, but we have a colon in Python. And it's backwards because you put the type after the variable in Python, and we put the type before the variable in C++. This is just a style difference between the two languages. The languages are very different, but part of the power of knowing both of these languages is you know how to use two different languages, and you can decide which language is best for the application you're trying to solve. Sometimes I solve it with Python, sometimes I solve it with C++, it all depends. So here you can see in C++ we're using the types, and we're required to use the types. But we still use the return value exactly the same. Now there is a type in C++ called void, which has no return. Okay, so this is just a quick look at the end of this video to compare C++ with Python. I hope that I've done a good job to explain how we can define our types in Python. Now this is not required, but it is something cool we can do in Python 3.5. All right, thank you for your time. I hope this was useful, and keep on coding.